The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome everybody to today's Prospero session. This is just one of many webinars we have throughout the month and year to provide you some nice little knowledge and tips and tricks. My name is Derek Krebs, and I'll spend the first couple minutes in PowerPoint, little quick introductions to myself and the topic, and then we'll jump right into the application thereafter. So again, welcome one and all. Everybody is currently on mute. We do have a nice question area, so if I can field and answer any questions throughout today's session, please take advantage of that. Go to webinar control panel there to your right. You can also minimize and maximize the attendee, the question area, by clicking on that orange arrow from the left to the right. That will minimize and maximize that. And I'll pause occasionally, maybe once or twice during the session, especially at the end of the session, I'll be fielding any questions that do come through the queue. We also record these sessions and put them out on our website for later viewing or sharing with any of your coworkers. So I'll be sending a nice little email thank you in a couple of days to follow with links to those and maybe some additional supplemental information that might come up through the question queue or action items I jot down. All right, my name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with MSX Group, recovering accountant. Been doing this for many dog or software years, going on 27 years. And the first 15 of those years, I and most of our founding team members worked at FRX and Microsoft for the first 15 years, helping deploy and develop those flagship products like Microsoft FRX, then Manager Reporter on the reporting side, and then secondly, Microsoft Forecaster on the budgeting side. Those were two historical separate programs and applications where you had to do double your work, but approximately 10, 12 years ago, we got spun off and Prospero was released to the market. So most of today's attendees are existing customers. Some are prospective ones, so welcome one and all. And then additionally of the existing customers, I do see several that are completely new to the organization. So what I want to do is meet the best of both worlds here of maybe new and existing users, even existing users. Some of the tips and tricks that might seem at least basic or basic to me might be some advantageous to you. So thanks for bearing with me to meet the needs of several audience members. And final slide I have, then we'll jump right into the application. Focus is going to be on the budgeting side. I did a presentation earlier on the reporting side. So we're going to look at different budget scenarios. Starting with the first item, we're going to be looking at some common budget templates, what we call a line set or standard format, but there's great feature to have overrides, like maybe my administrative departments might use one template of expenses only, but how about my sales and cost of goods sold department might use a second template. So you can have as many different templates as you wish, but very easy cookie cutter approach versus Excel hell. We're not. So we can leverage and reuse these lines over and over based on the responsibility centers you pull up. Secondly, there's great detailed budgeting ability like revenue and cost of goods sold. I'll show you some examples of. Or one of the largest costs of most organizations is their staffing for human resources modeling, or maybe capital needs to buy some new computers, equipment, manufacturing equipment, you name it. And then there's also the bells and whistles, I sort of call it, maybe at the very bottom and up above of line items where I might break one account, travel, perhaps further, or memos. I want to add some nice little annotations behind why I'm budgeting amount for maybe you, my boss, reviewing it, or others, along with history and obviously reporting of budget versus actual. I'll tie in those processes together. Item number 3, cash is king, they say. So a lot of organizations now, as I'm doing this 27 years, are budgeting balance sheet and cash flow. So we can definitely include that inside our Prospero budgeting system. Formulas will be key, and I'm very fond of using statistics and driver-based modeling. Like an example might be I want for revenue to budget the number of units sold and maybe price per unit, or even down to the salesperson and customer level. So the possibilities are endless regarding what you want to budget to. And I sort of simplify that, calling it data entry points, so you can have as many or few as needed for your budget methodology. Item number 5 ties in with the first line regarding our different line set templates. I'll show you some standard one that might only have our account in it for, let's say, revenue expenses, but there might be instances where I want to do some top-down budgeting, allocations, or assumptions. Shall I show you a couple little different ways we can scheme up our screens to maybe nimbly model? And definitely number 6 and 7, I alluded to briefly earlier, but item number 6 especially, there might be some instances during some tumultuous times, and we know we've been in here lately to do some budget versions like best case, worst case, or maybe going from quarter 1 to quarter 2, etc. So easy capabilities of using what's called the copy plan, different budget versions or book codes as they're known by, or maybe I want to budget a new department, employee, etc. So I'll be doing several of those common role plays that I see just to make sure you're acquainted with the efficiencies we can provide. All right, and now let me jump right into the application. And I'm going to start with an end user perspective where whenever I log into Prospero, it could be installed on my computer, or maybe IT has some central server computer I log into, or third and finally, it could be web deployed based on your methodology or preference now, or in the future, you could easily change it. We also host the application as well, because sometimes it might be on your servers or a third-party servers, as many of the Dynamics family are maybe moving to D365 or some hosting providers for that. So rest assured that we can easily change wherever configuration is in a matter of minutes on such. Now, looking at me logged in as an end user, normally I open up Prospero to my quick launch area, because how about every month, and how about let's say you're my boss and the CFO, I like to look at 2 reports every month. The one here to the left, actual versus budget, or about here to the one, a rolling 12 month. Or secondly, I might have some favorites to the budget version that I'm working on. And we call that visibility, because here in the input area, I only have access or visibility as an end user to one budget version, but you might have multiple. And then additionally up above here, same type of thing, we have visibility on the report side. Let me even start doing a little historical past analysis of my budget versus actuals. I'm logging into our demonstration database, and let me just acquaint you for a moment. We have really 2 segments, or shall I say 3 in our general ledger. We have location, secondly department, and third, we have our account segment like income statement and balance sheet accounts. What we also additionally have in our demonstration database environment is multi-company. And what we do efficiently is we create a little virtual segment and tree to do ease of consolidation on multi-company. But let me just focus on this one location for Denver that this end user only has access to. And then I'm opening up the report looking at all of my departments, but I'm really in charge of about 6 departments within this Denver location. So I want to first of all analyze my income statement for this past month. I can drill down to the account and transaction level, including vendor customer information, because here I started with what we call the financial level. I drilled in, opened up this secondary tab looking at the account level, because I have 2 departments where I have sales data. And then third, I drilled into this top single department, and it took me down to the third transactional level, where I can include some additional detailed data inside my column, where I have a detail column type. That was on our last session on some cool reports, as this is cool budgets. I can then add some nice little annotations explaining maybe some variances to you or others reviewing my budget. There's the icon indicator. I can hover on top of it. I'm reading now the last note that I added earlier today in the prior session, where Derek and I spoke about this variance. And then here to the right, it might be maybe the original note in the account was added at an earlier date, but then earlier today, maybe a second person may add a second note, because I'm logged in as a generic manager 1 user, but it would give you a nice time date stamp and your name next to the note or annotation you have. And I simply right click if I wanted to add an annotation. I like to clarify that I'm in the published report area, meaning this is a nice final static copy of all my published financials that I can then maybe add some annotations, drill in, or do some graphical display of data here. And I'm just going to really just touch upon most that we spent in detail on our last session, like this graph. I even could drill into it. Like there's the different departments. Instead of a graph view, there's my report view. and literally 1 minute review of some key concepts in the last session. I could then take that data out to Excel, because on the prior screen, meaning in the workspace where I'm electronically, real-time, securely drilling down, adding notes, graphs, etc., as I just quoted, many, many advantages of having a licensed user and viewing the reports in a workspace. If not, I can definitely send it out to Excel, PDF, or printer. And then it's easy for me just to show a couple examples quickly in Excel, like the same data and sales for one department I drilled into. I just send it out to Excel, has all the same fonts, formatting, shading, formulas that I want, maybe a single sheet, or second example in the earlier session, maybe is the multiple location and departments that I have on various tabs. I could also easily export reports out to, including actual and budget. And third and finally, we saw also an example of how about a board member or banker seeing a report collection or package every month. Report 1, income statement. Report 2, balance sheet, or report number 3, cash flow, maybe in one file, yes, like you're seeing, or it could be separate files, again, via a report collection of functionality inside Prospero. And let me now continue. That's sort of full circle looking at a budget versus actual report, but now I'm going to segue to how this budget easily gets entered and templates defined inside Prospero. So this budget data, when I open up the report, it could be real-time live, even as of this morning, maybe people making edits on. And then what I'm going to do is taking one step back. I was in the quick launch area. I was looking at a historical sort of read-only report, but how about it's now that time of the year, you would like me to do budget input of maybe my next projections here. Now, what I want to emphasize is what I call dimensionality. These are the same dimensions we saw when opening up the report, like company, location, department. The only difference is I opened up the report looking at all departments drilling in, but I'm going to focus on, first of all, Administration Department 100. I'm going to call that Department A I'm currently viewing. And really the punchline is I'm really just going to show you different templates. I'm about ready to open up 3 departments, but 2 of the departments are pure expenses only. Like you see here at the very top, it starts with salary. I'm going to click this button to reopen the input, meaning I'm just going to go to a different department. And let me now go to Department 300 for marketing. Once again, a pure expense only department. And this is what I'm going to call my default line set that maybe the majority of my departments utilize. Has the same look and feel. Department A, expenses only. Department B, expenses only. Now, third and finally, I'm going to open up another department here, which is one of my revenue and cost of goods sold department. And it's going to have a completely different look and feel. And then additionally, it's going to have segments that are not in my general ledger, but that's okay. Possibilities are endless of what you want to budget to, even recording actuals to. 2 examples. One we're currently seeing is data that's not in my general ledger are products, like product 10 for motors I'm selling or building, product 20, etc. Product is not a segment in my general ledger, but that's okay. We can definitely include it in the Prospero data warehouse, both actual budget and statistics. Like units sold and price per unit are not in my general ledger, but that's okay. So you sort of get the theme there. Second example is, and let me start with looking at one of our detail screens that most utilize. It's optional, but for human resource and modeling, one of the largest cost of organizations, most do have this tab being turned on and seen. However, security related, as I go to the HR tab, I'm seeing the employees or positions. It could be by name or position, your HR modeling, just for a single department, like Department A, I'll call this. Maybe this tab is not even seen by me based on my security setup. And that's just really a group 1 or group 2 that maybe has HR tab available or not. Or if this tab is available to me, it could be read only, because maybe I'm the control freak in accounting that any HR changes has to go through Derek. Otherwise, this is read only of maybe the staff I have on the books today. And how about I'll use MSX Group for an example. How about we have 100 employees in our organization, give or take? I just loaded all of our employees through a simple import file. And maybe I'll just show you that file, but easy file. I just need really a column of their name, how much they make, and what department they're in. All right, and then what you see is some color coding that I prefer and have defined, which is gray shade, stay away from, because those items are controlled by me, the CFO. Or how about lines in white? Yeah, free for all. You can edit and enter data to those. Now let's take a closer look at some of the salary data, and I want to show you a couple of items behind the scenes. Well, in our demonstration database, we have 2 expense accounts for salary, for exempt and non-exempt. So behind the scenes, I need at least 2 pay grades, as they're called, that defines these 2 expenses. Or secondly, and optionally, maybe I want to budget by bonus and overtime amounts. I want to keep track of statistics for headcount, hours, and full-time equivalency. And finally, these are some of my benefits, like how about some of the payroll tax? High in the beginning of the year, but then it tapers off once people reach maybe some federal and state limits that you impose. And similarly, some other examples like health, life insurance, etc. Now, let me even take us a moment to the Human Resources tab, and I'll just scroll a little bit from the left to the right for those people I see new on this phone call. Earlier phrase, just to repeat, this could be by their person's name, like Bob or Sally, or by position. I need this many truck drivers, I need this many registered nurses, technicians, etc. It could either be head count or hours, because in this department, we have both hourly and salary people. So if you wanted to have both of those showing mixed, otherwise if I wanted to show everybody on the same page, meaning hourly based, I'm going to turn on this little check mark. Or if I wanted to show everybody full-time equivalency based, I'll do so here. And also we have efficiencies where there might be some people or positions I want to aggregate in their budget, meaning on this line right here, let's call it truck drivers here, as I might be a transportation company, and I want maybe 3.5 heads. And sometimes you might only show 2 columns, like what month they start and what month they end, like period 1 through 12, like January through December. Or you can even break this out by every single month of the year, especially if you have any seasonality or varying hours by year. I'll again repeat some of those key things behind the scenes of just a little check mark I can turn on and off if you want to budget annually or not. Annually means just 2 columns when they start and end, but this is by month. Over here to the right, let's say a person makes X dollar, like $45,000, but how about I'm going to give everybody, and usually I import in maybe a cost of living percent raise in what month or period. That even could vary after the fact by person or position. Bonuses over time. Now, any amount in the bonus that I key in over $100, so if I just type in 1,500, then it does it by dollar. Anything less than 100, it assumes it a percent. So you have the best of both worlds there. Overtime, as I scroll to the right, again, these are optional. I could have had turned on and off for the overtime amount or percent here. And then additionally, we have some user-defined benefits fields. How about I'll use our MSX group as an example. I reside in California, but we have employees in about 15 different states. So when I mention that import file, maybe once a year, once a quarter, that I want to load my existing staff, I mention a column for their name, how much they make, what their department they're in, but maybe I have a column that says, yeah, Derek is in California, therefore the system will know Derek's California state tax rate, which I'll take you to in just a second. Or maybe for health insurance, you could budget one flat rate, let's call it $500 per head per month, but nope, maybe I want to get a little bit more accurate because maybe I know people that have single coverage or family or high deductible, low deductible, etc. So we have a table I'll take you to that easily defines these choices in their names, like workers' comp, cell phone, yes or no, 401k, or some other examples that are common. All right, So most of our end users, nor I do not have to think or worry about this. I've loaded everybody. If there's any hires or fires, I could do so. And then here's the insert button here if I wanted to add a new hire, which I probably won't go through those little motions here, but the insert button or delete button for little quick edits to hours, wages, or adding or removing people. And then as I go full circle back, these gray lines were locked from input. And now let's look at some of these benefits, especially behind the scenes, because this is an end user that does not have visibility. So I have a second session open where I'm now going to go to the input area for our budget input. I'll focus on this one budget template, but I'm going to show you 2 or 3 different designed ones. Let me just go from left to right in the tabs here. Starting with the design tab, this is what I'm going to call my default line set. When I open up those 3 departments, the majority had a line set that had expenses only in it. But looking at the override tab, whenever I pulled up, let's say department 200, which is my sales department, I'm using a different sales line set that had maybe the products, number of units sold, and maybe price per unit, or even cost margin or percents in that line set. Now looking here to the left, you can define this individual little budget template by a single posting department like 200 is, or it could be by an aggregate, like I'm turning my attention to a region. So let's say in my region, I want maybe my sales region versus service, which have different people beneath it. Maybe I want to do it more at the high level because total region is really everybody. Because maybe it's more at the department level, I have different templates, but you can have individual posting or summary level at any of these combinations that you need to define which responsibility center gets to use which template. And then how about let me segue now to the Human Resources tab. I'm going to call this my top half, and this is my bottom half. Well, most organizations, for simplicity, we take little baby steps, and a lot of times if I only have one salary account, I only have one line here at the very top. But in our example, we have a couple of different salary accounts for expensing. And then also we're doing it by hourly and salary, and maybe some different bonuses eligible or not. And even defaults. And these defaults, I'd like to confirm and emphasize, can be imported and defined at the individual. Like Derek gets maybe a different percent or dollar for his pay rate or bonus or overtime. But these might just be defaults. All right, so in this top half, we primarily define the expense account for our salary. Now, these are also statistic accounts. And I'm going to do one little side step. That is, maybe I don't have a lot of these statistics I need for full-time equivalency hours or headcount, or how about units sold or price per unit? Those are not my general ledger, but that's okay. Most of the time they're not. Don't worry about it, because in seconds, I come here under segments, natural. First of all, these are all read from your general ledger automatically as new accounts get added or departments, etc. But what I'm going to do is let's add a new account here for maybe my second session of today. All right, you can give it any name and type. Now we're here to the right. We do have some accounting logic, like definitely revenue expense, which would be debit or credit types, but statistical or none, or if I don't really care about the value debit or credit, like statistic I could have chosen there. And sometimes this list might be a little larger based on the account types or categories you have in your general ledger, but those are some of the key basic ones that define maybe a debit or credit type and accounting logic behind the scenes. Let me go ahead and just save that, and then I can easily start budgeting to that. Now, let's look at the bottom half, which is our benefits and taxes. I can easily hit the down arrow to add more over time, because how about, and I'm going to daydream a little bit, how about we just open an office in Hawaii, and how about they have a different state tax rate, and a few lines above, account 6300 is our state unemployment tax, but how about in Hawaii, they have a 7% on a limit of $7,000. And if Derek moved to Hawaii, along with his department and name, Derek might have a Hawaii tag next to his name. And finally, I'm in this state field, which is one of the benefit fields that already exists, but I'll add one here in seconds. I can click on the insert button, type in Hawaii, and say, yep, this is then the applicable rate for any maybe Hawaii people. Great, I'm done. But even I'm having flashbacks of some other products I've worked with over the years, that'd probably take me several hours of ugly Excel hell to do what now we can do in seconds. Let me cancel this out, not to muddy my demonstration database too much for others here. I did note that I can add, like I showed you another combination here, like that state, I noted I can add a new field here. So on the toolbar, I can click on this little up arrow, and what it did is it added a new column, which I'll do one more time, because maybe this new column on some of the ones earlier I mentioned could be cell phone. And then I click on the choices like yes or no. It could be option A or B, like maybe some of the health, family single, high deductible, low deductible. All right, so very simple table. Now, another big picture thing, just to make sure I'm clear with in the tutorial, is benefits could either be a percent of salary or a fixed dollar per month per head count or full-time equivalent. Speaking of, if it is a fixed rate, most people do it by FTE, because I could have 10 heads, but they all work half-time. So 10 heads, but only 5 full-time equivalencies. So most people do it by that, but at least you get the option there, which that was a customer request we got a couple years back. Okay. I think I've wrapped up most of my little information within this window here, like percent of salary with a limit or without, like Medicare, or a fixed dollar. Maybe the last note I'll make is sometimes life insurance, instead of $25 per full-time equivalent, how about it is $1.50 per $10,000 of a person's salary? Because maybe some of my directors only get that. And then if the higher they make, the life insurance company charges me more. So you also can do this type of methodology based on an increment of their salary. Another phrase I noted was one of these features like headcount and FTE that was requested by one of our customers for a few years back. And I always like maybe once a session that I do. Under the home ribbon, we have a couple of great things. Online help, message board, where maybe our collective users can maybe share thoughts or ask questions, or finally feedback and support. Literally a couple of seconds on each. Now the help button, there's a shortcut for that. If I hit the F1 button, the advantage of the F1 button is the system knew exactly where I was in the product. It knew I was in the input area. It knew I was on the HR tab. It directly took me to there, and I have all my related little links and further topics down below I can cruise to. Once again, I hit the F1 button, which is the shortcut for the online help. This is out in the web. We're updating this frequently. Second thing on the home ribbon, continuing downward for message board, which is basically on our website. Most people email us or we have sessions like this to share product knowledge, but definitely we've had some people come out here and ask some little questions or share some little tips and tricks. Now, this is just our website, just like you probably saw today's webinar session. And we probably hold at least maybe 4 or 5 webinars every single month. We also record those to your later viewing and consumption. And finally, we have on this same home ribbon, feedback and support. I call this a hotline into our product and support teams. Either it could be a suggestion, like a new feature, or these to the right is maybe an issue or support request. And once I type in my name and description and submit, I automatically get a case number, and we have people jumping on that immediately. You don't have to pick up phones. You don't have to wait for a day or two. So I like to applaud our support and development teams for their great efforts, and mostly these are words from kind of the customer base. All right. Thank you for that little tangent and sidestep, but definitely worth a quick minute or two on that little note. I believe I'm finishing up with the HR discussion. I'm not going to bog down with a lot of these little fields or details I rarely use. Now, one is when I mentioned about If this check mark is turned on, I will only have 2 columns for what month they start and end, like period 1 through 12. But if I turn it off, it's going to break it out by month, and I'm going to go full circle back to the session I was last in. So there is, if annually is turned off, that means I have maybe seasonality can vary by month. All right, as I return full circle, there's all my budgeted dollar. I also have some nice history and comparison, like actuals and variances, all real-time and self-contained in the system. I don't have to manually import and export data. So even I'm having flashbacks of past programs and processes we had to do all the years, which is now automated in Prospero. How about some bells and whistles now I'll take us to, which is, and I'll bullet point, maybe line item detail, where I break out, let's say, travel advertising further. Secondly, history, where I can see who made changes to an account. Or how about third, these little blue dots are notes or annotations I'm adding to the account. And let me start with the history. Here's this disability insurance. I put my cursor anywhere on this line, does not matter. And then this button here for history, it'll give me a nice little time date stamp. Here's Derek. I'm logged in as a generic user called Manager1, but on these days and times, the values were changed from X to Y dollar. Well, I demonstrated I knew what I was looking for, meaning I put my cursor anywhere on this line, and then I clicked on the history button. But how about I'm going to put my cursor somewhere here at the top, meaning not on a specific account or line. And now, once I look at history, it's for the entire department, meaning all the different accounts here. I can expand and see the history. There's history of account 1, history of account 2. I have some searches because, hey, maybe I want to search by Derek, or I want to search by Manager 1 inside the system, or maybe a certain date. And finally, the first example was a single account. The second example was all accounts in this one department. Or third, we also have history, if I took one step back, for the entire system. If I had this data input screen not open for a specific department, history would see it across the entire, all departments. Next bullet point, annotations. How about Derek is budgeting legal? Uh-oh, he's in trouble again. He did something. What did he do? Needs some legal help. So I want to put a memo or note to it. I'm even going to click on this little toolbar because how about you are my boss reviewing my budget? I'm going to show the annotations column. So here to the right, as I'm going to turn it off or back on, I see now for all accounts or even line items here in green, I see the note, who, and when they added these budget notes for my review. Okay, great. I don't have to pick up the phone. I don't have to email. Okay, that makes sense. That's right. I remember talking about that. And how about finally, let's pretend this is a travel account where I want to book a trip to Hawaii, Jamaica, Europe. But how about in marketing? Here's my advertising account. And then I can simply right-click on top of a line. You see the icon to the left for inserting a line item. That's also in the toolbar. Or I could have annotated, meaning add a memo or note to it. And if I come up here and insert a line item, this might be then some new marketing campaign here. And then I'll probably stop there. I can then budget certain dollar amounts in certain months. I even come up here and copy that to whatever cells I want, like Control R, copy it to the right, Control D, copy it down. So most Excel functionality contained within the system. And let me see, I think those are the high bells and whistles I want to at least allude to. Let me not shortchange some of our detail, quote unquote, cool budgeting scenarios. One, obviously, I'm recapping my human resources modeling by name or position. Last thought I wanted to add on that is there are several industries like healthcare, manufacturing, that sometimes I do not do it by individual position on this tab because it might be very variable in nature, or they might have such high turnover I might want to do it more statistically based, meaning using statistics and formulas in this main screen or tab, which I'm just going to segue to one of the departments I opened up earlier. I sort of called that my sales department, but instead of revenue dollar, where maybe I want my budgeters to enter units sold and price per, I could have cost, but also I could have maybe labor per unit, or I could have labor margin, or I could have position 1, hours worked, or position 2, hourly rate. So again, possibilities are endless of however it makes the most sense for that area of your organization to model revenue, expense, or even balance sheet is a plug I'm going to segue to here in a moment. All right, and that same statistic I added to the system, I was in the segment area adding the account. I would simply just add it to my line set, and maybe my formula says, hey, take what I'll call A times B, units times price. Okay, great. These products are not in the system, and even segments. Let me even just make one other little added remark to that. Usually what I'm about ready to do, we like to think and ask ahead of time for this, so don't hastily do this, especially for new customers, is under segments. These are my core general ledger segments, but I'd probably say maybe about 30% of the implementations, going on hundreds I've done over the years, we might want to add another segment that's not in the general ledger that I frequently use. Obviously, it's not my general ledger, so I might not have access, but I want a budget to it. So in the segment definition, this is what's read from the general ledger, but here I might want to come up here and add product, maybe to the system. Okay. So now I'm adding a whole new segment under the segment definition, but make sure you speak with your consultant and support before doing that. But there's been some customers in maybe a second or third phase of their deployment. We usually ask those questions well in advance, but case points we've done over the years. All right, let me close and not save that. To recap, HR detail, we looked a little bit at my sales and cost of goods sold detail of different flavors I could do. Now let me turn my attention to capital detail. So let's role play that I'm in the IT department. I want to buy some new computers, or I see some great functionality with Prospero. I want to buy a couple of users to have them simply log in so I don't have to manually do all that because it wastes me a lot of time and effort. So on the capital tab, I can come up here and click on the insert button, and I'll just review here in the background, but leave this open. I just give it any ID, like 1, 2, 3. Now this capital type pick list and recurring theme is you define what these IDs and labels are. And behind the scenes, which I'm going to take you to, it tells the system really 3 primary things, like what is my balance sheet account in this capital account column? Secondly, what's my depreciation account? And third, the life and months. For me, a budgeter, I just choose one of those when I want to put it in service, because maybe in September, I'm adding one of these capital items. The count times the amount. So here's an example of 5 computers costing each $2,000. So I'm budgeting $10,000 in this given month to the left. And then going full circle, at least in my income statement that my budgeters do, they'll now see some of the capital wish list of what I'm going to call new capital. Also, we have what is called new depreciation versus existing that they do not control. Existing depreciation I import, and I'll add a sentence to that later. And then finally, I'm going to pull up as maybe the CFO. I do the balance sheet and cash flow for everybody. They don't worry about it, but maybe they do give me their capital wish list needs that I want them to do, or maybe I do it for them. Let me now take you to behind the scenes for that capital setup. So here in Prospero, I'm just really moving from the left to the right on the capital tab. I'll just hit the down arrow. And then here is where I just choose the balance sheet account. So most of our balance sheet accounts begin with a 1-7 that I can search into. Now, speaking of depreciation, it's common practice. Let's say we have in our general ledger account 7,100. But it's common practice for us in the system, like I created that new statistic, where I create 2 dummy accounts. I'll call it dummy new 7,100 for depreciation, or dummy E for existing depreciation. Whenever a user adds capital, it goes to the dummy new capital depreciation account, but maybe that DE, dummy existing depreciation, with maybe the same 7100 suffix, I import maybe once a year of existing depreciation of assets we already have on the books. But very easy technique. And then in my line set, I just sum up that new, which again through the capital screen gets populated automatically. And then I, the CFO, import the existing. And then there's some defaults prices. Sometimes even I leave that 0. That way the users have to think and not overlook the default price, and life in months, which also calculates my budgeted new depreciation. All right, so very simple behind the scenes. And then let me now take that one step further. After reviewing the income statement budget, let me close this and not save. I'm now going to go to a secondary input set, because the main thing that's going to differ when I pull up the balance sheet and cash flow is going to be two things. One is my column for my balance sheet is going to have a beginning balance column that normally I don't have or display in my income statement. The second difference is I might have a corporate department that has revenue expenses using a line set with revenue expenses, but then on this balance sheet for maybe that same corporate department, I might have a different line set used for this secondary input set. So now I'm going to segue. So here is the first input set for my income statement that everybody sees, but here is this one, what we call visibility, that they do not see. And then here's one little button from a concept earlier. When an end user logged in, we have maybe 50 reports, but they only saw 2. But now I'm on the budget version. When I mentioned best case, worst case, I might say, yeah, they're able to see this budget version. Otherwise, maybe not. All right, let me now open up this screen. Now notice I'm not prompted for the location department because I've predefined those. So as I take one step back, in the property of this input set, if there's segments you do not budget to, I can hard code and predefine them. A lot of times all zeros would be a default if you do not care or want to budget to them. And that's why we did not see these 3 segments for company location department, since on my balance sheet, maybe I have everything go to maybe a single area. I call that again dimensionality. And we're going to look at maybe a third example of that in just a second. All right, so there's a no-brainer for me. I did not have to choose or define any of the company location department, since I'm really doing this for my entire company at quote unquote the corporate department 000 we'll call it. And here now we have a visual. The 2 differences to repeat, my column is different from my income statement because I have a beginning balance column for this balance sheet and cash flow. Second difference is for maybe the same administration department, instead of revenue expenses, I'm seeing balance sheet accounts and formulas. Now, let me take you to a key formula that's used in balance sheet and cash flow, what we call a lookup formula. Because on my balance sheet, and I could also say that in my statement of cash flow, this could also be a screen which includes, I have it here at the very bottom, here's my net income. Meaning, how about all the 50 people on today's phone call? In the last few days and today, you've entered all your budget data. I'm automatically looking that up. Even though I'm in a different department, like maybe 32100, I'm looking up all these last 2 segments. I'm looking up all locations in all departments for the first segment, which is our account, for the account called net income. And let me repeat that, but let's look behind the scenes now in the line set. First and foremost, looking at the property and the dimensionality of this line set, most reports and most budget input screens only have the natural defined. However, for maybe these 1 or 2 rare lookup rows like net income, I'm turning that on temporarily. And then when I'm done with the edit or review, I turn that off. Now here is where that same net income line, I'll scroll downward. I can give it any code as I go from the left to the right. Then here is, here's some balance sheet accounts that I'm eventually going to be budgeting to. But here is in my lookup row, meaning I'm not calculating into, it's really read-only, not editable, not formula-driven. There's my net income account. And then looking at the tree, this is a summary account. This is obviously a roll-up of all my revenue expenses. And we saw in our earlier session their powerful nature in these roll-up trees. And I could probably think about 10 awesome things about this account roll-up tree. Obviously, ease in avoiding report maintenance, some of these lookups, security consideration, expansions, etc. And then finally, continuing to the right, we told the system, grab all location, all departments, which once again is our default tree automatically created and maintained as new items get added. And then finally, we do have here to the right, and let me emphasize, we have this little lookup button turned on, which means, hey, regardless of what department I'm in, I want to go look up data from a different area, either being a single posting item, or in this case, an aggregate like all revenue expenses through TNet, or maybe all departments and locations through all. And usually we have maybe a few of those rows here, because here's a second example. When I added the capital assets, those accounts in my general ledger begin with a 1. I could just do wildcarding or ranges for that, but most oftentimes too, I'll have a tree that has both revenue expenses in it, because I probably could have just used this summary node. That way, if I change or add accounts or ranges, I usually lean toward referencing a summary account. That way, I just change it essentially in one tree. I don't have to worry about my multiple line sets after the fact. All right, good. Accounting 101 type little stuff here, but I want to emphasize here sort of that lookup formula. Let me now go full circle back. There's my net income, my capital additions, and then up above I might have some related lines based on that. And then also I'm having flashbacks because some of these others might be formula driven. Most of this is just inputable cells, but for receivable, I might have a statistic for where users enter the day sales outstanding, like 30, 60, 90, or whatever waterfall effect that you might want on some of your formulas. All right, but definitely statistics and formulas a little bit more common in this balance sheet and cash flow screen. Let me just look to the side in case we have any questions that came through the queue. Otherwise, I want to wrap up showing you maybe a last screen or two of different dimensionality. Let me close all tabs here, little shortcut I have. Otherwise, found under Window, close all is where I can go, or right click to add that to my quick access toolbar. So maybe one click shortcut in the future. Now this particular screen I'm going to pull up, instead of me pulling up 10 different departments, what I call a bottom-up budget, this is more what I call a top-down screen. So now when I'm opening up the screen, like my balance sheet, notice how I'm not asked for the department. And the reason why is what you're seeing now is flip-flopped. The earlier screen had in lines the account for revenue expense. But now this screen has my accounts in columns. And then instead of me, in the first half of our session today, where I choose department 1, 2, 3, I have departments in my line set. Now we can obviously mold this screen. I'm always a consultant trying to be politically correct. But how about, let's say I'm a government agency. A lot of times I'm just doing more annual budget where I don't really want to worry about breaking it out per month here. Now what I've at least shown, and I can maybe show some additional hidden columns, is I might have all the months here to the right. Let's pretend these columns don't exist, but I'm just having them display for illustration purposes. Maybe you, the end user, you might only key into maybe one or a couple of these columns. So instead of me, again, toggling between 10 different departments, I can come up here and key in $1 here, $2, $3, all on one screen. And then even I can have COGS, margin, percent, etc. Now when I save, it'll eventually maybe write data here to the right, but I'm not going to not mess with my data too much. And let me now show you behind the scenes, pretty basic here, starting with the line set. Instead of the account segment like revenue expense or balance sheet, I turned that off in the line set and instead turned on department. We're using one of my maybe summaries like the good old all node of the tree or any other ones you create. I'm expanding to above to show every individual department. 0 levels down means show me every individual one, but you could say show me maybe 1 level down or 2 level down based on the subgroups you have in your tree. And then also whenever you expand, I was just really just quoting these 3 fields. Finally, just be aware of this expanded segments, especially if you have more than one segment, like I only have department, but if you have both department and account, you can define which or both you want to expand. And maybe finally, there might be instances where notice this line is gray shade and bold. So here in my original input screen I returned, this bottom line, this summary total is gray shade and bold, but all my detail above is not. And maybe that's one last field that caught my eye and to share with you, meaning, hey, the parent total, I bolded and underlined it like you see in the background, but on all my expanded departments, maybe no underline or maybe no bold. All right, and even I had some customers I was working with on allocations yesterday and today that they use this same type of methodology of some lookup formulas, like grabbing corporate expenses, maybe allocating about based on headcount or FTE. So this might be one method to do so, along with that lookup we saw earlier where I had more departmental prompt. And how about let me show you finally. In my 2 segments, meaning the line set, only have 1 segment department, or in my column, I have the account segment, like sales, cost of goods sold. Let me just show you here multiple segments. And oftentimes in these screens, I predefine my dimensions. That way, again, I'm not prompted for a company, location, department. I've already predefined those. But here's another example where basically here's my sales, account 4100, or my salaries, account 6000, where I have maybe 20 different responsibility centers all in one screen. But the very first one I pulled up at the very beginning of session, I might have to go to 20 different screens to do this, but maybe me for a report, or me for an allocation, or for me, maybe the salesperson doing the data entry singly on one screen, I might prefer this. And then looking at the line set, going to be a similar concept, but the only thing different is instead of only 1 segment, I've turned on a couple. And then I expanded, and then here I can say yay or nay what to expand on, because here is account 4100 sales, or account 6000, a single account, but then, yep, I'm expanding to show all location departments may be applicable. All right, cool. There's probably a lot that I didn't get a chance to discuss today. We're sort of winding down within our today's session. Let me do a couple of things. One is I'm going to pull up my contact information if you have any follow-up questions. I'm also going to check the question queue in case anything came through. But sometimes we have a shy crowd that are more just sponges, just absorbing some of the data. I do not see any questions in the queue. Let me finally look back to my little list in case there's another key concept I wanted to share with you. But I think I've addressed some of the key concepts for today. So how about I'll just sort of wind down with a nice little thank you for participating today. And there's going to be tons of future sessions. And again, open door policy, call or email me or support or info@msxgroup.com at any time. Otherwise, thanks for joining us either live or through this recording at some future point. And have a good rest of your day and happy holidays. Goodbye, everybody.